So bakit ako nag-aksaya ng panahon ko kung may iba palang mag-hearing? I can very well focus on something else, Mr. President. I am happy to do so. I just do not want to waste my time and this body's time. I would like a clear resolution on this matter.
I guarantee the chairwoman on Ways and Means that in fact, si Tira, to the extent that I can, will be avoided.
You may now continue, Senator Cayetano.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, for the information of the body, I'll repeat what I said because I think it was quite noisy earlier. So earlier this morning, there was a hearing held by the Committee on Economic Affairs, chaired by Senator Amy Marcos, on a resolution inquiring in aid of legislation into the effectivity of the investment promotion agencies and its corresponding incentive regimes in generating revenues, creating jobs, and providing business opportunities for the people. Mr. President, dear colleagues, I think everyone knows that Committee Report number 50 is Sitira, which is on the floor. So I'd just like to pose my question to the body and ask that if a subject matter is already taken up on the floor, have we changed our rules? Are we allowed to have another committee conduct a hearing on exactly the same subject matter in another hearing without even informing the chair, even on a personal level? For the record, this committee is secondarily referred, but we have already conducted numerous hearings on this matter and continue to reach out to our colleagues. We even had a briefing for all the staff of our colleagues, and many of you have sent their staff, and I thank you for the time. So I just posed that question because it is a little bit confusing to this representation that I chair this committee and there will be another hearing the effect of the Sitira or the tax, the proposed measure by the DOF in another hearing. And if I can, the resolution is available for everyone to see. The whereas clause specifically point to the ineffectivity of Sitira in addressing the need. So we will have parallel hearings now. That is the question I pose to the body. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. President, with all due respect to the sponsor of the Sitira and the chairwoman and my seatmate in Ways and Means, the intention was very simple, and it was a hearing not only for Sitira. It so happened that Sitira was part of what the different members and sectors of the business community are now calling the triple whammy of the Philippine economy. And these are COVID-19, the abrogation of the VFA, and the potential removal of the Philippines under the GSP. And thirdly, their concern and anxiety that on top of all of this, the Sitira would also be passed in the form that the House has. Unfortunately, the Committee on Economic Affairs has such a wide range of topics under it, given that all items that have anything to do with those that are economic are covered. So I do not want to show any disrespect or overlap or duplication. I simply need to hear from certain quarters who are clearly going to suffer cumulative losses in the export and manufacturing sectors, as well as the BPO and other sectors po.
Anyway, the floor was with Senator Cayetano, and I understand she has indeed legitimate concerns because of some bills that are already on the floor. So the Majority Leader, what do you say?
Mr. President, unfortunately, there's no explicit ruling on our rules in terms of committees holding hearings on particular topics referred to their committee. The resolution that was filed, to the Committee on Economic Affairs was tackling, because if you look at the Committee on Economic Affairs, Mr. President, the scope of the committee is the planning of domestic and foreign public indebtedness, indebtedness, and general economic development and coordination, regulation, diversification of industry and investments. So unfortunately for the Committee on Senator Pia, the resolution really was meant to find out
Ways and Means Committee.
the Ways and Means Committee that I guess the effects of SITIRA to these particular industries. However, of due courtesy, we have it as a interparliamentary courtesy among our members and respect. We usually do not do any more overlapping so that there's no double discussion of a particular topic.
With all due respect po, there has not been...
Are you
Sorry.
done, Majority Leader, before I recognize Senator Marcos?
Yes, Mr. President, we can recognize Senator Marcos.
All right, Senator
Yes,
Marcos.
thank you very much, Majority Leader. Thank you very much, Senator Cayetano, Mr. President. With all due respect, this had to do with investment policy. And as a result, we also had to tackle the SITIRA on the sidelines. I think something of the same nature is occurring with POGO. Tatlo na yung investigasyon sa POGO, sabay-sabay po. Yung sa ating women, pagkatapos sa committee ni Senator Gordon na Blue Ribbon, ganun din sa labor. Hindi ko tinatakal as tax, kundi yung impact sa export po at saka sa BPO. And it's also cumulative dahil itong triple whammy na tinatawag, hindi lamang yung SITIRA, which is actually speculative in nature, but a measure instead of those that are already impacting us today, such as COVID-19, as well as the VFA abrogation po.
Mr. President, if I may just
Senator
clarify,
Cayetano.
I would be very happy to hear the opinions and concerns of our other colleagues. But just to clarify, in the hearing that Senator Marcos conducted, and she may confirm this, specific provisions of the SITIRA bill were taken up, including the creation of the FIRB, including the footloose industries. So these were the sunset provision. This is very specific to the SITIRA bill that is on the floor. And the use of the POGOs as analogy is also, to my humble opinion, cannot be used by analogy. The chair of the Committee on Labor, when he decided to have a hearing, we talked about it. And we discussed that he would, which he did, manifest on the floor that he will not touch on the tax measure because there are pending bills in the Committee on Ways and Means on the tax measure. And it was not even a lengthy discussion. It was a given because, as the majority floor leader pointed out, it may not be in the rules, but it is a practice that we have had time and again. And also for the record, and I would also be very happy to hear the confirmation or clarification by the senator who chairs the Committee on Economic Affairs. One of the speakers was no less than the Director General of PEZA, who is known to have been very vocal about her opposition, and who has at some point said that she would now support, but I guess she changed her mind. So she's the person who was given the platform to speak there. I don't mind, dear colleagues, you can speak to any resource person, you can invite them to your office, but to have them in a hearing on a matter that is pending on the floor is a slightly different thing, and that is why I would like to have a healthy discussion on this matter, because it's a little bit difficult when I'm chairing a difficult subject matter, and there are parallel hearings going on with resource person who have attended my hearing and have already given their official statements, and I'm not aware that they have changed their positions on it. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, Senator, the Minority Leader, Senator Frank Drilon is recognized, then Senator Pangilinan.
Mr. President, I have been directed by the Majority Leader to express the views of the Majority Leader, Mr. President. Mr. President, I think this highlights the need for us to be very extra careful when we refer bills or resolutions filed. Here, in this particular case, it is very obvious that the two committees are hearing the same subject matter. And it is entirely possible that the findings or the report of one committee will differ from the other. In other words, the Committee on Economic Affairs may indeed find that there is need to maintain the incentives. On the other hand, the Committee on Ways and Means feels that certain incentives must be cut. The key here, Mr. President, in my humble submission, is to make sure that when we make referrals, we be conscious of the definition of the jurisdiction in the rules, and we be conscious of the same subject matter having been referred to a committee already. We look at precedents in our work, and I think that will avoid this confusion. I agree with the chair of the Committee on Ways and Means, Mr. President, that indeed this must be corrected, and we cannot have two committee reports on the same subject on the floor, especially that the findings may in fact be different. We submit, Mr. President, in behalf of the Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President, with all due respect to our Minority
Senator.
Leader, the same subject was not undertaken. This was the subject of export promotion, of trade, and other aspects of our economic development that had little or nothing to do with CITIRA. In fact, if the transcript is derived, we spent an extremely large chunk of the hearing dedicated to the COVID virus effects as well as the VFA. The CITIRA aspects were only brought in by many of our exporters at the very end of the hearing, and a very short period was dedicated to that. Having said that, Mr. President, I will ask our exporters to keep their complaints about specific provisions in the CITIRA out of the hearing, and instead focus on those threats that already confront them at present, such as the COVID-19 as well as the VFA abrogation.
The Bills and Index were informing me that the intent of the resolution originally was focused on investment promotions agencies. But in the fourth whereas, the CITIRA was very prominent. Perhaps that's the reason that the chairman of the Committee on Ways and Means was, and they talk about it. Anyway, Senator Pangilinan, you were seeking the floor.
Yes, I'm sure that's the case, Mr. President, but inevitably in economic planning and development, there seemed to be a disconnect in the encouragement of export and trade, and then a CITIRA that to some sectors, with all due respect to both the SOJ as well as the chairwoman, appeared to be contradictory or in conflict with the push towards export for the Philippines po.
Mr. President, before we
But
recognize...
to the degree that I can, I will avoid their taking up CITIRA and these specific provisions.
Mr. President, with the
Yes,
permission of
Majority
Senator Pangilinan, so that just to answer the query of the minority or the position of the Minority Floor Leader, I believe it would be more prudent now to instruct the Bills and Index that all resolutions filed be referred to the Committee on Rules first, so that we can make a study, discernment on the proper committee that it should be referred to. So it's just a slight delay, but I think this will lessen the friction amongst our colleagues with terms to when it comes to referrals, Mr. President. If it is all right with the body. But that's the practice. Because every week this crops up every week, almost every week. We're having problems with jurisdiction. The good Minority Floor Leader always reminds me that it should be it should be referred to the proper committee. So, Mr. President, instead of directly referring the resolutions to a committee, it should be referred first primarily to the Committee on Rules for us to make the proper discernment on the committee it should tackle, and then make the refer it the next day, Mr. President, or the day after.
We can study that. Perhaps what we can do is that the issue raised by the chairman of the chairperson of the Committee on Ways and Means should be referred to the Committee on Rules for further study and reaction. Now,
Mr. President.
the problem is
For future
there
reference.
are other resolutions that would probably need not be referred to the Committee on Rules first.
Yeah.
Simple
it's
resolutions.
simple
But
resolutions,
when
Mr.
there are
President.
controversial issues, then perhaps
Yes,
we
Mr.
should refer it to the Committee on
example,
Rules first. We can
honoring-
give that particular directive to the Bills and Index. Now, the other problem is, before I recognize Senator Pangilinan, is that apparently in this resolution there is already a scheduled hearing in Cebu next week. So what does that mean?
Yes.
Or this week? Anyway, Senator Pangilinan, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr.
Yes.
President.
Mr. President, if
May
you
we
will
hear
allow.
from Senator Pangilinan first?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you,
Acknowledge.
colleagues. Mr. President, this representation was Majority Leader in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Congress.
Indeed, yes.
And I'm not familiar with the current process, but during my time, Mr. President, all resolutions, all bills had to go through the Committee on Rules. And it was the Committee on Rules that refers these bills and resolutions to these specific committees. In other words, unless it's been changed now, that it is referred to the bills and index, and it's the bills and index that decides. Under my watch, the bills and index makes the recommendation, but I sign off, and the referrals are then undertaken. If I do disagree with the bills and indexes as Majority Leader and Chairman of the Committee on Rules, I refer it to a specific committee which I feel it should be referred to. On many occasions, Mr. President, I had, during that time, overruled the bills and indexes and decided that a particular resolution be referred first to the Committee on Rules. Mr. President, I think that's still the practice today.
All right. Very enlightening point.
It's the same
Again,
practice, Mr. President.
let us refer all these to the Committee on Rules now,
Yes,
so
Mr.
that
President.
you can
But in
come
fairness,
up with
Mr. President, just to put it in proper perspective, if you read the resolution, Mr. President, if you read the resolution in its face, it is referring to the economic impacts of these particular measures. Now, if you ask our colleagues at the Bills and Index, as well as members of the Committee on Rules who review this for us, that is the proper committee to be referred to as primary committee. Now, Mr. President, we cannot avoid these things happening because of the broad responsibilities of many of our committees, Mr. President. For example, when Senator Risa looked into the topic of issues on POGO with women, trafficking of women, it raised a bit of an eyebrow to my colleague from Zambales, but it's okay with him. But you know, I had asked him. I went up to you and I had asked you if it was all right. And he said it was all right because in proper time, we will also be taking up another issue on POGO, which is malfeasance and misfeasance of government employees, for example, customs and the like, no, and immigrations. So, ang punto ko dyan, there will come several times that this issue will prop up on the floor, Mr. President.
Right, but the important thing
President?
that your committee should look into, Mr. Majority Leader, is the point of Senator Cayetano, which is this is already on the floor.
Yes.
That's her point. It's not whether it should be referred to other what. Her point is that the issue is already on the floor.
Correct. That's why I mentioned earlier,
That's
Mr.
why
President.
I'm referring everything to your committee for proper disposal.
That's why, Mr. President, just to answer quickly, that is why earlier I mentioned that it is intra-parliamentary courtesy among colleagues on that issue. There is respect on the topics to be discussed on committee level and on the floor, especially if a bill is already pending on committee level.
Mr.
Senator
President,
Pangilinan.
the plenary.
Yes.
if I may make a suggestion to the Majority Leader, Mr. President. In previous instances wherein resolutions would cover several subject matters and several committees would have concurrent jurisdiction, we would refer them concurrently, but then we would qualify. For example, in the case of POGO, if it would affect several committees, we would refer the POGO issue to the Committee on Labor with respect to labor issues. We would refer the POGO issue with respect to the Committee on Women with respect to women trafficking. In other words, this can actually be, and has been practiced before, Mr. President. So perhaps as a proposed solution, with respect to this economic affairs resolution, provided it does not cover Chitira, which is already with the Ways and Means, it can cover other aspects of that has it has jurisdiction over in terms of economic affairs.
Or investment impact.
Yes.
All right. Senator Marcos.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. May I first begin by apologizing to the chairwoman of Ways and Means. Unfortunately, as the former chairman of Economic Affairs knows, the scope of economic affairs is so wide that even in our rules, the definitions and delineations of jurisdiction are unclear. So that what I shall do, if this arises once again in the future, the CITIRA, may I simply turn over whatever positions there are to the Ways and Means chairwoman, being that they're already in the floor. In the meantime, in the spirit of Women's Day, which was yesterday, I hope that she accepts my personal apology and the failure to apprise her, at least personally, of what could occur during this hearing.
All right.
Thank you, Mr.
Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President. And also, we make it a policy now. If we're discussing, for example, change of referrals, there must be an agreement by the committee chair whose initial or principal referral was made in the first place. So I do not make referrals by a whim, change of referrals. We have to get consensus from both committees. And in this referral, Mr. President, the referral was Economic Affairs as primary committee and Ways and Means as secondary committee. I was only informed about this problem on Saturday while I was in the gym exercising. Senator Cayetano talked to me. I was halfway through my jogging, and we spoke lengthily about this issue.
I confirm.
But unfortunately, it was a Saturday, Mr. President. Our staff were out already on break, and the hearing was today, Monday. If the hearing was on Wednesday, I would have asked the staff of Senator IMEE to have at least spoken to Senator Cayetano about this. So, Mr. President, again, I hope that this doesn't happen again. I will be more discerning and referrals to committees. I therefore order the Rules Committee Secretariat to refer these complex resolutions to the Committee on Rules for action first. And the simpler resolutions directly to the committees.
Mr. President.
So the directive is there's complex resolutions to the Committee on Rules. All right?
Yes, Mr. President.
Now, the last word from
Mr.
Senator
President,
Cayetano.
yes. You know, I would just like, first of all, I accept the apology of the senator who chaired the Committee on Economic Affairs, Senator Marcos. I accept the apology. However, I have difficulty understanding the explanation that the committee covers a wide range of topics, because if you look at the resolution, there are 5 whereas clauses. The 3 whereas clauses are the background, the citing of the Constitution, what are the IPAs, and what are the jobs of the IPAs. And the last 2 resolutions are very specific on the effect of CITIRA. So if you are a resource person and you will receive this, obviously the topic is CITIRA. That is all I'm saying. How do you move forward if this is the resolution? How do you say that in the next hearing, and there is one scheduled on Saturday, you will carve out, you will exclude the concerns on CITIRA? The whole resolution is about CITIRA, dear colleagues. What do you want me to do? It's all about CITIRA, you know. So, and to be specific, and that's why I was very clear in saying I was not in the hearing. I had another hearing with our chairperson, Sherwin Gatchalian. Very specifically, our colleague asked the question to the PEZA Director General, what is their feelings about CITIRA, and then after that, she even made a comment that, so hindi pala totoo ang chismis na okay na kayo. So in response to the statements of the leadership that it is very possible to come out with different reports, of course it's very possible. I already told you. I know that the PEZA Director General was against CITIRA, and then she was on board, and then she was somehow again. So are we just going to have continuous hearings giving heard the floor and the others, and then the same question was asked the other resource persons there. Okay ba kayo? Ang DOF, tinanong din, okay ba kayo dito sa sunset provision? So bakit ako nag-aksaya ng panahon ko kung may iba palang mag-hearing? I can very well focus on something else. Mr. President, I am happy to do so. I just do not want to waste my time and this body's time. I would like a clear resolution on this matter. This will happen again and again if this is not clarified very specifically on Sitira. Somebody else can share this if that is the decision, but I just want clarity on this. Thank you.
Majority Leader,
May
would
we
like
make-
to entertain a motion that all these be referred to your committee.
Yes, Mr. President, I so move. And also make an appeal to the chairperson of the Committee on Economic Affairs to
Yes.
probably withhold first the hearing in Cebu this week or postpone until we resolve this issue, Mr. President.
Yes. Mr. President and Majority
Senator
Leader,
Marcos.
I give my assurance that even if you agree to the Cebu hearing proceeding, I guarantee the chairwoman on Ways and Means that in fact Sitira, to the extent that I can, will be avoided. This was taken cumulatively together with the COVID-19, together with the VFA, and all the other threats that face us, including ASF, Taal, and the need perhaps, as recommended by Senator Gatchalian, for an emergency stimulus package. Maraming salamat po. Mag-aabang po kami sa
You're
Bajon.
going to Cebu riding a plane?
Sorry po.
I said, I was asking if you're going to Cebu riding a plane?
In theory po, I am booked on an airplane po.
All right. You're not afraid of the virus?